So, hello and welcome everyone to Monday at Dreamforce in the Dev Zone. I hope everyone has thoroughly enjoyed themselves thus far. I know it's early. But we have a pretty cool session for you today entitled Efficient Apex Testing and Bug Fixing Using MavensMate. So our goal really is for you to walk away from this session with some cool tips and tricks to make yourself a little bit more efficient as a Salesforce developer. All right. So who am I? My name is Joe Ferraro. I'm the CTO of Mavens Consulting. I've been building applications on the platform since about 2005, which when I say it out loud that's a long time. So I've seen the platform evolve and grow, do some really fantastic things. And I have with me up here my esteemed colleague, Kyle Thornton, who is a technical architect at Mavens.
Yeah, as my fourth Dreamforce year, I've been on the platform since about 2007, and excited to be here to show you guys some really cool things today.
Awesome. And who's Mavens? So if you're not familiar with us, we are the preferred healthcare and life sciences implementation partner for Salesforce and Viva. We have about 50 consultants located across North America and Europe. And just this year at Dreamforce 2014, we have 11 Mavens in attendance, speaking on 9 different technical sessions. So if you want to follow the sessions or our activity here, you can follow the hashtag MavensDF14. And we're feeling a little extra pride right now because just about 45 minutes ago, we actually won the Salesforce Partner Innovation Award for our work in marketing over the last year for a customer that we built an application for, Eli Lilly. So, and we're hiring. Okay. So I said we want to walk away from this session making you a little bit more of an efficient developer. So we're going to show you some awesome MavensMate features that we think that are going to help you to do that, make you a little bit more efficient on the platform. So how many of you are using MavensMate for development? Okay. So that's a lot. So for those who aren't familiar with it, it's a tool to build Salesforce apps really from any text editor or platform. Right now, the flagship plugin is Sublime Text. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But to get down to the crux of it, really our mission is to make building Salesforce One apps easy and fun for developers, regardless of your text editor or platform. So when Kyle and I were kind of organizing this session, we were also in parallel developing the Atom plugin. And the session initially started with a lot of Sublime Text stuff. We're still going to allude to some of that stuff, but we got a little ballsy and we decided we're gonna demo some Atom stuff today. So we'll see how it goes. But using MavensMate, you can do a lot of the stuff you can do with Force.com IDE and Developer Console. But you can also do some other cool stuff like deploy to various Salesforce orgs, static resource bundles, Apex scripting, live peer programming. We have some really cool stuff that we're trying to do to bring a different tool to the community in an open source capacity. So just a little bit of history for those who are not familiar, which doesn't seem like there are that many that are unfamiliar, but really the idea was in 2011 was to get away from Eclipse, which if you're using MavensMate, you probably can commiserate there. So I wrote a bunch of scripts in Ruby to write Force.com apps from TextMate, which was my go-to text editor of choice. And in 2012, Sublime Text came along and kind of blew me away, blew the developer community away, regardless of the programming language or framework that they were working on. It was really fast, just made me more efficient. So I decided to take all of those scripts and rewrite them in Python, which was the plugin language. And then somewhere around end of 2012 into 2013, I realized that I would be really, really stupid to continue to do this every 2 years as a new text editor came out. That was the new hip text editor for developers. So we decided to rewrite the underlying file system integrations and Salesforce integrations into a platform independent executable. So that's kind of what we spent last year on. And this year, we're spending a lot of time enhancing the Sublime Text plugin, but also we're really excited about some new stuff that's coming out into the text editor world that's really web-based. Things like brackets from Adobe, which is an open source project, and Atom, which we're going to talk about, which is backed by GitHub. So now that we all know what MavensMate is and a little bit of history, let's talk a little bit about the typical developer workflow. So this goes for any platform, not just Salesforce One. But you may have a guy in your office that looks like that. Hopefully you don't, but it happens. He may be in a back room somewhere. Well, we all know developing, testing, and debugging can be an exhausting process. So you're starting by writing and compiling your code. And you may do that from the Force.com ID, you may do that from Developer Console, from MavensMate, wherever. Then you have to figure out where to execute your code. So if it's a Visual Force page, for example, you might execute the code in a browser, so you may switch over to the browser. If it's an Apex batch script, for example, then you may run some execute anonymous and run a unit test. But you have to figure out a way to execute the code. Then to validate it, depending on whether you're using TDD, you may write the unit test afterwards or finish the unit test, and you have to go back to your IDE to do that. Then you got to run your unit test, and you do that either from your IDE or you go to the Salesforce UI and run tests. Then you have to go and find and download the log, and you might do that in the IDE or you might do that in the browser. Then you got to parse the log. You might open that in a platform-specific log viewer. Then you may create some checkpoints, typically in your IDE or in the UI in Salesforce. Then again, you're going to execute your code to make sure that you can download the checkpoint results. And then basically, you're doing this over and over and over again. I hope it didn't boil down your lives to something overly simplistic, but listen, this is what we live for. This is what we do. Either when we're building a feature or we're debugging some code, we're trying to fix something, this is what happens. And really what we're trying to do with some of the features that we're building, and we're trying to do it in an open source capacity, so if you guys have ideas for ways to streamline this, then you can just post an issue on GitHub and we'll at least talk about it. But our goal here is to streamline the feedback loop. So it can be really difficult to understand where you need to go to get which information, especially as an independent or an inexperienced developer on the platform, or somebody who, maybe you were working somewhere else for a few months, in some other language, and you're back in Salesforce and you're writing, and you're like, where do I go for that again? And our goal is to make that process a little bit more streamlined. So streamline the feedback loop, make it more natural to the developer to determine where to get certain things or where to go for certain things. And so Kyle's going to come up here and talk a little bit about how we are approaching that when we talk about building features with MavensMate. So, Kyle.
All right, thanks, Joe. So, when we're talking about features from MavensMate, we're really trying to look at it from a few different areas. And our overall goal is unifying the developer experience. So we're looking to get you timely, curated feedback when and where you need it. And there's 5 key areas that we've been focusing on. The first of those is logs. So when you're building any application, not just Salesforce One apps, but pretty much anything, logs are important. You need to figure out where your bugs are coming out and what stuff looked like at the certain time that the bug was happening. So getting those logs to you as soon as possible is certainly important for your development cycle. The second area we've been looking at is in documentation. So these days, you guys are using multiple resources, such as Stack Exchange, the release notes, the official documentation, Google, whatever else. And one place you're not using documentation is in your IDE. And we're questioning, why don't you have documentation in the IDE? Next area we've been focusing on is the browser, right? We're all building browser apps. That's what Salesforce One apps are. And if we can get the browser into your IDE, we can maybe reduce a few of those cycles where you have to jump back and forth and toggle windows, and just, those few seconds over, the 100,000 times it takes you to actually figure out what that bug was might actually save you, an hour or so. So next area is around the unit tests. So in Salesforce, you're required to have 75% coverage to get your code into production. And I'm pretty sure I saw a few eyes roll there, but really it is important. You don't want that bug getting into production because you didn't run unit tests, and next thing you know, your job is gone. But one of the hard things, especially for new devs, is understanding what this code coverage means. What's covered, what's breaking, what do I still need to work on to get to that 75%? And one of the key tools, obviously, is the test runner that I'm sure many of you used, and we're just looking for ways to enhance that experience with running those tests. And finally is in the area of collaboration. So pretty much everything we do today is social. You've got Facebook, you've got Twitter, and then in the enterprise, of course, we've got Chatter that we all use. And we're trying to figure out how do we make our IDE social. So we've been looking into things such as pair programming, which I think Joe alluded to a little earlier, and possibly even sharing solutions out to Stack Exchange or finding those solutions on Stack Exchange, bring them right into the browser. So that way people can share their solutions and hopefully just make things easier for everybody. So now that we know about kind of where we're looking, we want to talk about what we've been doing to really bring this to fruition. So the first thing are unit test templates. And these are crowdsourced metadata templates that come from a GitHub MavensMate template project. So any of you can actually contribute to this, and we invite you to. All you have to do is submit a pull request with a template that you have, and if it gets accepted, it will automatically be pushed out to everybody who's using MavensMate. And that's great because now people who are new to Salesforce, who have to write one of these unit tests, or anything, any class or anything for that matter, can use a template to start, and they don't have to waste time figuring out what exactly is the format of this file. The next area is in the test runner UI. And like I said, this has been around for a while in MavensMate, and we're just always trying to figure out ways to enhance it. But the test runner UI is important because it gives you really that good graphical representation of what is going on in your org. So you can see here, there's some lines highlighted in red that haven't been covered. And there is a string builder class that is only 44% covered. So you get a really good, quick idea of where do I need to spend my time to get that coverage bolstered. And as a bonus, for those of you who've used it before, there's an arcade there. So sometimes those Salesforce tests take a while to run, so maybe you can jump over and play a little Pac-Man or Tetris or some Mortal Kombat and still actually be working while you're not working. So in the area of documentation, what we're looking to do is curate the documentation, discussion, and solutions from all these various sources that are out there and make this as timely and relevant to you as you're developing. The documentation in this case could potentially be embedded into the developer experience. So we've got these code helpers that will appear on the screen and help you out possibly in understanding what is going on. And this is all optional. We're not going to force you when you're using the tool to actually have to deal with these if you don't want them. If you know exactly what a database.batchable does and you don't want to see these highlights, you can of course turn them off. But for somebody new to the platform, this could be really critical in helping them understand what exactly they're doing. Another new feature that we have in Atom is bringing the browser into the IDE. And in this case, you can see we've got a Visualforce page on the left. And on the right, we actually have an iframe containing that page that will show the representation of that Visualforce page. And as soon as you save that on the left, you'll see that page on the right saved. So it's going to save you some cycles from having to toggle back to the browser and refresh the page and then do what you need to do. It's automatically refreshing for you right in the browser. You can do what you need to do, check it, and if it doesn't work, go right back to your code. So I mentioned we're trying to do some stuff with logging too. And using Salesforce's streaming API, we've got the ability to pull down logs as they're created, again, to save you from having to jump out, go find that log, and pull it in. So the overarching thing here so far is we're trying to keep you in the environment if you want to stay there. You don't want to toggle away if you don't have to. So we're trying to help you stay within that development environment. And the last feature I'm going to talk about here is the remote real-time pair programming. So this is using Firebase and Node.js, and it's bringing some Google Doc-like collaboration to your Apex and Visualforce metadata. So this is going to allow somebody to work with you in a file rather than, say, sharing a screen or something and having the person kind of tell you over the phone, okay, so go to line 7 and then go in a little bit. Nope, go a little bit further. Now change that variable. No, not to that one, change to another one. It takes a lot away. The person now has the power to actually type right into the same file you're working on. Then you can go and save it, and if it works, great, you guys are done. Otherwise, you keep collaborating and working together. So with all that, I think it's time we see a demo.
All right.
So I think Joe's going to set us up and
Cool.
with this demo here.
Thanks, Kyle. That's some awesome stuff. So let's talk a little bit about Shuffle Bean, our fictitious startup company here. So we are a really cool, hip startup here in San Francisco. So we have some great offices, and like every hipster startup, we have lots of ping pong tables. And so with these ping pong tables, they've become quite popular. And we're having a really difficult time managing all of the different games and making sure that we're keeping score. And especially when you go into tournaments, this becomes incredibly important. So in order to build an application like this, naturally, we decided to build it on Salesforce, which is the best platform for this type of application. So Kyle, why don't you go ahead and open it up?
All right, let's see, what are we seeing here? Gonna make sure we get the right screen. I'm now working off a screen that's way down there. All right, so this here is the app that we've been working on Salesforce to track all of the ping pong matches. So we have a couple objects here. It's the matches object, has some pretty basic information. It's just tracking the players that are going. There's a Boolean to track serving, and most importantly, all the points. And the points are a separate object so that we can capture some other stats, such as who was serving and who won it, and maybe put some stuff together down the road. And of course, we've got the players object to keep track of all of our players. So we've had some interns working on the All Matches tab here, and what they're looking to do is keep track of all of the scores. And in this case, you're able to click on the various ones and increment the scores as they go, and you should be able to, whichever the active one will increase. So let's take a look at some of the code. I'm going to open up the project, and hopefully this will be visible for you guys. And I'm going to take a look at the class here. So pretty standard class, not much going on, but there is some stuff of interest here. I think Joe's going to talk about that.
Yeah, so if you'll remember, we talked about bringing documentation or timely documentation to the editor. So we're showing Adam here, so if you're interested in learning more about Adam, you can come to our session tomorrow in the dev zone at 4 o'clock. But Adam is built on web technologies, HTML5, CSS3, JavaScript. So what you're seeing here is really an HTML document. So we can do a lot of really cool stuff with it from a UI perspective. So we're calling out, or what we call code helpers. We call out certain things that we find interesting about the platform, potentially more sophisticated Apex classes or Apex classes that require a little bit more consideration when you're implementing them. And again, this is really, really important stuff. I know probably most people here have been on the platform for a little while, but when you're new to the platform, this is really important stuff for people to understand the context within which they're working, especially if they didn't create the class. So what we can see here is we're calling out without sharing, just as an example. So we can see here that we have a little blurb about without sharing. If you scroll down, Kyle, you can see also we can call out annotations. For example, the future annotation. What's the implication of using future? And we can add a little link here with some additional information. And for example, in this particular demo, we can see that we're taking them directly to the documentation. But in the future, we have some really cool plans for this functionality where we can crowdsource this stuff and make it, again, as relevant as possible. So be thinking about potentially being able to use this internally within your development teams and have this kind of information be able to be created by your development teams and surfaced only for your development team. If there's a particularly complicated project you guys are working on, we find that that could be a potentially really interesting feature.
All right, thanks, Joe. So I've been tasked with writing a unit test for this. So what I'm going to do is create a new class, if I could type. So we got our command here, new Apex class. And what you'll see is the UI opens up for us. And this is going to present me with a list of templates, if the internet ever picks up here. And you can see there's quite a few out there. Driven development unit tests and controller extensions, and it's pretty good library so far. But again, if you guys have any patterns that you find useful for yourself and you think others can use, we've got the links at the end. Feel free to submit to the project, and we can get those out to others if we can get a pull request in. So in this case, I'm just going to write a unit test. And I'm going to write it for the match controller. So let's just call it match controller test, and go ahead and create that metadata. Suspense is killing you, I know it. All right, great. So the test is opening up here, and it's now created on the server. So you can see, because we use a template, this is information that has been pulled down and populated for us already. I don't have to go out there and figure out what the format of a standard unit test is. Now, to save us some time and save you from boredom, I've cheated here and brought in, I'm just going to copy and paste that code, and we're going to go ahead and compile this. And once that compiles, we'll be ready to start validating. And in order to do that, I'm going to start logging here. And, uh-oh.
Right, so what, no? Might be the internet.
The beauty of live coding, right?
Oh, we already have some logging set up.
Okay.
So this is the perils of live coding on something that's not released yet. So what you can see here is that when the concept of logging, I believe in Sublime Text it's called being able to perform a quick log. So we take the list of user IDs in your config directory in your debug file, and we set up traces for all of those users. So the start logging command, it's been renamed, will set up all of the traces for those users. And now with Atom specifically, what's nice about it is because it's all browser-based or web-based, we can create a MavensMate as a streaming API client. So what's nice about that is when we start logging, we can then connect to the streaming API to give us that log information in real time instead of having to pull. So we know that the API hits are precious, and that's one of the great things about the streaming API. And there's a couple endpoints in the streaming API that are especially relevant to developers, this being one of them.
So pretending that this had been green, it would say that it's now set up logs for, in this case, 2 users. So because we have 2 in the array, when one's Joe's ID and one is mine. So what I can do now is go ahead and run tests. And that's going to go out and just asynchronously run our tests using the tooling API. And you can see right here that the debug log popped up at the bottom. And I have a button here to open the log. So I'm going to go ahead and do that first and then just mention that only one of our 2 tests had passed. So when I open the log, I can see some stuff has been, some syntax highlighting has been applied. So it makes it a little bit easier to read this. And when I scroll down, one really pops out at us. We've got a user debug statement that's being thrown out, and it allows us to quickly find those. So I know that when I'm coding, often I will have to enter some weird, crazy characters that I can search for easily to find those in the log. So having the syntax highlighter here is going to make it a little bit easier to find things. So taking a quick look, I can see at line 35 there is a query exception, and I have no rows for assignment. So if I jump back to the controller here and jump up to line 35, I can see that I'm in a catch block here. So clearly the problem is coming from the try, and I'm doing a query here, and it appears that I'm not getting anything back, and that's probably because the point match ID is not being set. So I think I know what the problem is, and again, in order to cheat here and make things a little easier so you guys don't have to watch me type code and mess it up, I'm going to grab my stuff off screen. Save that and see how that does. All right, so that's saved. So now we can run test one more time. All right, great. You can see again a log came in because we ran that test, but in this case now 2 unit tests here are passing. So now that we've done validating the code, we want to get more of a picture, overall picture of what the org coverage looks like. And rather than do that through single unit tests, we can do that with the test runner UI. So if we pop that open, we get a list of all of the unit tests that are in this org, which in this case, there's only one file that has unit tests. So I can select that, or I could select all, and we can go ahead and run those tests. And if these were going to take longer, maybe I could run over and play some Pac-Man or Tetris or other items that are in there. So our tests should be back, and they are passing as we expected. We just saw them passing. But more importantly, we can take a look at the class coverage now. And we can see that our match controller is now 84% covered. And if I click on the show coverage, I can see exactly what code hasn't been covered and figure out what unit tests I now need to create in order to figure out, to get that coverage bolstered up. We tend to aim for 95% at Mavens, even though 75% is the required. I actually gave a talk that said 75% is not a goal. Remember that. So with that in mind, we'll come back to that later, long after this session, and fix that. But the next thing I want to show is a problem that we've been having with one of our pages. So if I flip back to the browser here, the issue we have is that when I click on this button here, nothing's happening. And I've been struggling with this one for a while. The interns couldn't figure out, but I know Joe has seen something like this, so I'm hoping Joe can help me out.
I can certainly help you, Kyle.
All right, great. So should I fire up a GoToMeeting, or what do you want to do to share screens here?
Kyle, this is 2014.
Oh,
Okay. This is not 2010. So why don't you go ahead and share your MavensMate session with me?
All right, so let me open up that page. So it's share. Oh, look at that.
Yep, so now Kyle, what he's done is he's actually shared his Atom session, his Atom MavensMate session with me. Well, actually, he's just exposed it to be shared. And just like a GoToMeeting ID or Google Doc URL, he's going to share that identifier with whoever needs to help him.
All right,
So go ahead and share that ID with me.
sorry, I got to go left to go right on my dual screen here. That didn't work at all. All right, so that should be almost there. All right, there you go, Joe.
Perfect. So now I have the identifier. And what I can do in my version of MavensMate is I can join his session. Now, what you're not seeing here is that when I load my screen here and I've joined the session, I can see Kyle's file just like I can see a Google Doc. So one of the first things that I can see here, Kyle, is that it looks like you have an issue here with a couple missing params. So let's see, around line 56, we can go in here and add a param here.
Jumpy on the screen there.
Okay, so I think we'll call it match.
And I'm not editing.
Okay, so you got to send the match ID to the controller, Kyle. This is an amateur move.
Yeah, it's my typical amateur move. That's why I don't have the title CTO.
Okay, so let's go ahead and add that. And I did notice that it looks like you're missing that exact same parameter down below as well. So go ahead and add that as well.
It's just like magic.
Okay. And we will go ahead and assign that to the point match ID as well. So this, Kyle, if you're new to Apex, will send this particular parameter to the controller to be processed.
All right. Well, let's give that a whirl. So I'm going to go ahead and save that now. So Joe doesn't have the ability to save that file, so a little protection for you, I guess, if you're like me and you don't trust Joe. All right, we've got success. So let's take a look. I'm going to refresh that now. All right, great. So that's working now. Looks like we can increment our points as we go.
That's what I thought, Kyle.
All right, so another problem we've been having, Joe, is I noticed that when I click on that, so when I'm incrementing the points, it's not incrementing up here. So I don't know, and this is kind of ugly too. I don't know what they're doing with this
All right,
styling.
so that's the concept of a re-render, Kyle?
Oh, re-renders.
Yes. So it looks like here on line 55 that you're missing a re-render on that particular DOM element. So let's go ahead and add current match to that re-render.
All right, I'll add that below
Okay.
while I am
Okay.
in the app here probe.
And then we got to get rid of that ugly header.
Oh, is that, yeah, up here. What's going on with that?
Well, you need to use a different span tag here, Kyle. So let's go ahead and do that. Okay, go ahead and compile that and see how it comes out.
All right. So what was that live preview you were talking about?
Thanks for reminding me. So what we can do now with Visualforce Live Preview is, as we're actually developing the application and compiling the Visualforce page, we can bring the Visualforce page inside of the editor. So why don't you go ahead and open that in Live Preview. Okay. So there we are inside our Atom MavensMate plugin, and we have the beautiful Visualforce page here.
Oh, there it is.
And go ahead and why don't we make a change here? So let's go ahead and, just for the sake of demonstration, let's go ahead and add a little H3 tag there for you guys. Okay, go ahead and compile that.
All right. I'm going to walk away for a second.
Okay.
Because we're all about no smoke and mirrors, right?
That's right. All right, there you go.
Like magic.
So that's the live Visualforce preview functionality that we've also included in MavensMate as well for Atom.
Yeah. All right, so I think that brings us to some links.
So the last 15 minutes or so for the demo, we showed a lot of Atom functionality. And a lot of people have asked what the future is for the Sublime Text plugin. So we're still supporting the Sublime Text plugin. We're still enhancing it. What's nice about what we can do with Atom is that we can modify the Chrome of the application really any way we want to. So if we want to add a button to the bottom, we can. If we want to change the size of a font, we can. Whereas in Sublime Text, we can't do that. So it's not nearly as sexy to demo. But as enhancements to Sublime come out, we're going to continue to try to add as many enhancements to both Sublime and the Atom plugins. And in terms of these links, so I mentioned the core of the MavensMate project, MM. So if you're interested in contributing to that core code, you can go to that second link there, which is github.com/joeferraro/mm. The Sublime Text plugin is the next link down, the Atom plugin, which will be available just after Dreamforce. And last but not least, we mentioned the MavensMate templates. You guys can, if like Kyle had alluded to, you guys can submit any templates that you guys are using. And a thank you to folks that have done that in the past. But also we have customers, or they're not actually customers, we have users.
It'd be great if they were customers.
It's open source for a reason. So we have users that are actually using templates specifically for their company, so they can source it in a private repo that any member of the company has access to. But if you have ones you want to share with the community, go to that URL, create the template. It's really easy, and submit a pull request. So that's pretty much it for us. Any questions? Yes.
Will the code coverage highlighting ever be in line with the actual code?
Yes, so it actually is, it's a hidden feature in Sublime Text. It actually is right now, and it will be better documented in the future. Yep. That would be weird. You should separate your work and life.
So there are microphones so they can get it on the recording.
Okay. Yeah, so that question was, when can I use it on my phone? And I don't endorse that.
So it's great to do the code coverage, but I find really you need to do asserts to make sure that your code's doing what it's supposed to do.
Mm-hmm.
So what plans do you have to assist you in that?
Assisting with asserts. It sounds like you might have some ideas. No, okay. Well, we don't have anything specifically, but it's open source, so if you have some ideas, we're happy to have the discussion, and we can talk after the session as well. Any other questions?
You mentioned about getting help from directly from the code. Is that really implemented, or can it be done, for example, universally, that an option in the right click? So to not have it on the code, highlight it, but hey, what's this? Right click and you can fetch it?
Right, yeah. So we're working on the user experience for that feature right now. But really the impetus for the feature was newer developers, so we're thinking about them. The question was about the code helpers. Is there going to be ability to toggle it on and off and potentially interact with it? So for now, it'll just be a simple toggle. I either want to see it or I don't. But in the future, in the very near future, you will be able to actually right-click and get that information on demand.
With the Visualforce live preview,
Yep.
I noticed there wasn't a URL at the top. Sometimes a company likes to add crazy variables or things they need to
Absolutely,
do up there.
yeah. It's a great question.
That's going to be.
It will
part
be.
of some of it? Okay.
Yeah, it absolutely will be. So we're thinking about, again, the UX, trying to figure out how to make it easy to add those URL parameters.
Gotcha. Awesome.
But yeah, that's definitely in our mind right now.
What would you say is like the time to deploy to a team this methodology?
You mean what we showed here, or just in general?
Well, like in general, getting like we're using Eclipse.
Okay.
If we were to switch over to this tool, what do you think the timeline would be?
I mean, you could do it today. I don't know. I mean, we have the
Is there a
same
lot of
exact
setup?
project structure. So, we have a source directory. We have the metadata under the source directory. We just have an extra directory called config that is optionally committed to source control. But we have plenty of users that are sharing, development team. Certain folks are using Eclipse, certain folks are using Console, certain folks are using MavensMate. So when I first created these scripts, I wanted to make it as close to the project structure, the standard project structure as possible for this very reason. So you should be able to share amongst your team.
Cool. Thank you.
It really comes down to how tasty are your carrots or how big is your stick, I guess, if you want to really push them quickly.
What are the restrictions for session sharing? You can do it on Sublime. Do you have any internet connection requirements?
So right now you will be able to join from Sublime. You can't share from Sublime today, but we're looking at that.
Do you have any plans for a schema browser?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
A schema browser? To be able to look at the schema?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Sorry.
In Eclipse, you can look at
Oh,
the
a schema browser. Yeah. So this one, I've been thinking about this for a while. I mean, I use Sockle Explorer, and I would say it's not really at the top of our priority list right now. I know that Windows and Linux users, they don't have Sockle Explorer, but I find it's a pretty good tool. So that's just an honest answer.
When I'm in a hurry, I still reach for the dev console because I feel like the compiling is quicker as well as the code correction. Are you seeing Atom getting better performance on that versus Sublime Text?
No. So that's a really deep conversation. So I think one of the challenges is keeping up with the Salesforce API changes. So one of the things that bogs us down a little bit is as the API changes, the responses change, release over release, we have to go back and we have to retrofit some code to make sure that it can handle it. And I think one of the other things is as the tooling API matures, we're learning better ways to use the tooling API. So we're in contact with Josh Kaplan, who heads the tooling API, and trying to get advice in terms of how best to use it. And I know there's actually a Stack Exchange conversation right now about how fast Eclipse is now with the Force.com IDE and compiling because it's using the tooling API. So I think that we're going in the right direction, and we're always thinking about that, but there's nothing in Atom that is you're not going to see any difference in compile time between Atom and Sublime.
Great, thanks.
Yep.
And we're getting the signal from the back, so I think we're all done.
All right, thanks guys.
Thank you.